What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Ranger Central, and today we are doing the second part here of 4 here in this series that I'm going to do in terms of acquisitions that the Rangers could make at the trade deadline. Like I mentioned in the last video, if you didn't check it out, go check that out. I highly recommend watching that before this, just because of the fact that you can watch in order, see what players I've covered, and see who I haven't yet. So it's going to be a pretty long series too, because of the fact that we have a lot of players. If you missed the last one, we named 7 in each of these videos because of the fact that there are so many options this year in terms of guys that they can just go out and get. They aren't really limited. It sucks that in terms of what they need, which is a true center, there is a little bit of limitations there, but there are some guys that I mentioned in the previous video, and I will in this one as well, that have the ability to play center. So we're going to talk about all of it. And if you're wondering why I mentioned this in the last video too, why I'm doing this in January versus last year where I did it in February, because trades tend to happen early at points as well. And last year we saw Bo Horvat get dealt in January, late January that was. But hey, we're quickly approaching the deadline. Before we know it, we're going to be there, and we're quickly approaching the end of January here. So that's kind of why I'm doing this. And I know January just started. People are going to say that, but I just mean in terms of like how quick everything moves. Like before we know it, it's going to be the middle of January by the time I wrap this series up. You guys get the point. But regardless, I'm not going to waste more time. We're going to talk about underrated guys that the New York Rangers could get before we jump into it. Leave a like, subscribe, all of that. Now, let's get into it. And first, we're going to start off with current Nashville Predator. Don't jack off, but Yakov Trenin. And Yakov Trenin has kind of just been quietly decent in Nashville. He won't blow you away in terms of his point production. He has a career high of 24 points, which was last season and the year before. In one of those years, he had 17 goals, 7 assists. The other, he had 12 and 12. He's probably on pace to have a very similar point production season where he has 38 this year, or 38 games played this year, and he has 9 points. That'd be great if he had 38 points. But in 38 games played, he has 9 points, 7 goals, 2 assists. So he's kind of on par to have what he did in the 2021-22 season. 21 PIMs on the year, has a shooting percentage of 11.9, so that's a little bit high considering, you know, he has 7 goals, so that might come down. He averages about 15 minutes of ice time. He has the ability to play center, but he prefers to play on the wing by the looks of things, considering he doesn't take many faceoffs. But if you look at his metrics overall, he's been a very good player when it comes to the defensive side of things. Offensively, leaves a good amount to be desired. He's not as poor as he was last year in terms of expected goals for and just goals for in general. He's below that in goals for, but expected goals for is not too bad. It's slightly below average. His Corsi for per 60, slightly above, but you could expect that to go up, especially if the Rangers form a line here and he does end up playing center. Maybe playing with Will Coley, and then Kaapo Kakko comes back, and then maybe Yakov Trenin ends up being the center there, and they get themselves a very good defensive responsible center there because of the fact that he is so good on the defensive side. You look at his metrics this year and last year, both in the purple, not too high, but 2021-22, it was very high. Plus, he's only 26 years old, so there is still room potentially for his offensive game to grow, especially if you surround him maybe with some more offensive pieces. The question obviously would be, is Nashville willing to deal someone that is only 26 years old? But everything tells you that he would be a very good fit. You look at his penalty kill percentage, and he's in the 97th percentile according to the JFresh cards, 85th percentile of even strength defense, and 51st at even strength offense. That's over the course of the past 3 seasons. And you look in terms of the miscellaneous numbers, he would be 3rd on the Rangers in hits per 60. He would be 14th on the Rangers in block shots per 60, and he would be 6th on the Rangers in takeaways per 60. So yeah, you could see the kind of impact he would make. Pretty physical guy. Good at playing on the defensive side. Won't block a lot of shots, but hey, you're getting a lot of takeaways. You're getting some physicality there. And I think that Yakov Trenin could be a very, very underrated add for this New York Rangers team. I mean, if you know me and who I've been talking about, you knew this was coming. Coming up on the Chicago Blackhawks, we got my guy, Nick Foligno. And you guys knew that I was going to talk about him, right? Like, you got to be silly to think I wasn't going to talk about him, unless you're new here. Maybe you don't know, but I've been on the Nick Foligno train heavy with this, and the only thing that's really going to make things tough is the fact that he's at a $4 million cap hit, so it would take 3 teams probably to make this sort of trade work. But man, would this be a very good add for the New York Rangers because of the fact that he brings so much in terms of on the ice and off the ice. I know people are going to be like, well, what's the difference between him and Goudreau, well, I mean, Nick Foligno is just a better player. Sorry, I'm going to tell you why, though. In 39 games played, he has 8 goals and assists, 17 points. He's only in a -4, which is not bad for a Chicago team that's not good. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a plus-minus guy. I think plus-minus stinks as a stat, but you're doing something right if you're only in a -4 on a pretty bad Chicago team. He has 39 PIMs. The guy does fight a lot, which is something that I think Ranger fans would really love about Nick Foligno, a former captain too, so he would bring a lot of leadership into the dressing room. Huge reason the Chicago Blackhawks probably got Nick Foligno because, I don't know, you may have heard this Connor Bedard kid they got, and maybe they wanted to get a leadership presence in the locker room for him. But shooting at 11% this year, he averages, though, about 17 minutes of ice time, so obviously his point production is going to regress, but I don't expect it to regress too much because I think he would get some power play minutes actually for the Rangers, maybe be in front of the net on that second unit, considering they don't really have that type of guy. Blake Wheeler tries to be that guy, but he's not effective at it. He could play center, although he's not been great in the faceoff dot this year, but he has been a 50% guy before, so he has the ability to. And then you get into the metrics, and it just tells you that he is a very good two-way player. He brings above average defensive side of, he's above average on the defensive side of the puck. Expected goals against per 60 in the blue. Goals for per 60 in the blue, but then you look at the expected goals for, that's in the negative, so that's something, like I said, it's going to regress, but I don't expect it to regress overly too much to the point where he's not producing any sort of offense. And his Corsi's down as well, but that's because Chicago just never possesses the puck, really. And then you look at his JFresh card in the 90th percentile at even strength defense, so you're getting some good play there on the defensive side, and he's shown it. And then the even strength offense in the 42nd percentile. And I don't think the Boston Bruins wanted to deal a guy like Nick Foligno. I think they would have wanted to keep him around if it wasn't for that steep cap hit. And then you look at some of the other numbers. Third on the team in hits per 60. That's where he would be if he was a New York Ranger as of today. He would be 14th in block shots per 60, and then first in takeaways per 60 at the time of recording. Obviously, that's what all these numbers are. But Nick Foligno would be such a good ad. I mean, first in takeaways, and by a pretty good margin as well, ahead of Jimmy Vesey. So, yeah, I think that adding a guy like Nick Foligno would be very helpful for this team in terms of both leadership, experience, and just everything else I mentioned in terms of physicality too. Like, the guy stands up for teammates, which I know Ranger fans want someone that will drop the mitts, and so do I want someone that's willing to fight every now and then. Nick Foligno is that type of guy. Plus, on top of that, he just is a good hockey player. It's not like you're getting Ryan Reeves where it's just he's not good at hockey and all he does is fight. No, you're getting a good hockey player on top of someone that is willing to drop the gloves if needed at any point. But yeah, Nick Foligno, another underrated option. Next up, we have my other guy that I've been hyping up from the Chicago Blackhawks, and that is Jason Dickinson, a guy that actually could play center and maybe could be a realistic option for the Rangers actually this year as their 3C. He's not really great in the faceoff dot. He's pretty much been below 50%. Actually, he has his entire career, but he has the ability to play center, and who knows, maybe he plays better here and does better in the faceoff dot here, because I don't know if you heard of their coaching staff. Have you heard of Nick Bonino, who apparently has taught the Rangers how to be better in the faceoff dot? Trocheck's not a bad guy to learn from either, but regardless, we could talk about that all day. But he's having a career high in pretty much everything. In 39 games played, only 39, has 13 goals. That is a career high for him in a season, but he's shooting at 21%. That should come back down to earth, unfortunately, but still nothing to overlook there. 6 assists on the year, 19 points. He's a +6 player on Chicago. That is something that you can't really overlook. 29 PIMs on the year, and pretty much all of his points, I think actually all of them, are at even strength too, so that's something that is a positive. He's averaging a very good amount of ice time, almost 16, so you're probably going to see a little bit of regression, like I said, too, with some of the previous players, like Nick Foligno. You might see a regression in points because he's not going to get as much ice time, so don't expect him to come in here and light the lamp like he's in Chicago, but you're still going to get very good two-way play like Nick Foligno would provide. His offense is in the positive. He's an above-average offensive player, an above-average defensive player. You look at the evolving hockey charts, really good in goals for per 60. The problem is the expected goals for is in the negative, not by much, but it is in the negative, so it shows he's getting a little bit lucky. His Corsi's in the negative, but again, that's kind of a product of Chicago. But his defensive metrics looking good there, and it has pretty much his entire career. You look at last year, he was way better defensively, and Jay Fresh's model backs that up too, considering the fact that it's based on the previous 3 years where he's in the 81st percentile in terms of his even strength defense. Everything else is kind of ugly to look at, but you look at where he'd be in the miscellaneous stats, he would be 5th on the Rangers in hits per 60, 7th in block shots per 60, and 1st in takeaways per 60. Yeah, another guy who would be 1st in takeaways per 60 for the Rangers. So you're getting good offensive play, you're getting good defensive play, and he's probably going to be a lot cheaper than some of the other centers we might talk about later on. So yeah, I think Jason Dickinson would be a very good quality add for this team. And yeah, that's my next most underrated player. Coming up next on the underrated list here, we got Thomas Novak of the Nashville Predators. I promise that it wasn't a coincidence. It's just when I was running through the list that I had 2 Nashville Predators and 2 Chicago Blackhawks. But yeah, currently on the Nashville Predators, Thomas Novak, who I was cautious and on the fence about for a bit, but I kind of swayed my opinion back because of the fact that you look at his defensive metrics from the past few seasons and they have just stunk. But I think that's also a product of terrible coaching. He comes here, plays with Peter Laviolette. That will change a lot of things. And Andrew Brunette's a lot better than John Hines. That guy stinks as a coach. But in 29 games played this year, he has 6 goals, 13 assists for 19 points. So I don't know if he's going to necessarily pass his point total from last year where he was at 43. But still, very solid production from a guy that can maybe play up and down the lineup. He's a -3 on the year, only 6 PIMs, does not take a lot of penalties because he's not really the guy making the defensive impacts that you want him to, but he's still at least solid this year. But we'll talk more about that. His shooting percentage is at 13.6, and that's the thing that worried me because last year his shooting percentage was at 18.3, and he had 17 goals on the year, so I was worried that was going to regress and his goal totals would drop even further, but he's probably on pace to have a similar goal total, so there's not really much to worry about, honestly, with that. He can take faceoffs and play center, but it's not necessarily the best position for him. You look at the charts as well, and they show you that he's a good player. 74, according to the Andy Rono model, 74 percentile in offense and 50 for defense. So not too bad there. He's pretty much in the blue for everything on the evolving hockey model, and his defense is slightly below average. If you look at the year before, though, it's pretty much all the way down the red. If people thought Patrick Kane's defense was bad, well, go look at Thomas Novak's evolving hockey chart last year, and you might vomit. And then the JFresh model says his defense sucks, but I'd imagine it went up considering the fact that last year he was just so horrendous, but he's still a very solid player in the 72nd percentile in terms of offense. I can't talk at all. 65th in terms of power play, 84th percent in terms of finishing. And yeah, I mean, he's a guy that could really help this offense and just make a difference there. The thing that people won't like, though, is his miscellaneous stats, where he would be last in hits per 60 on the team. That's not great. 16th in block shots per 60. Not the best, but you're mostly bringing him in for offense because there is some offensive guys. This isn't like the depth video where it's strictly, guys for the bottom 6 that are defensive forwards. These are more guys that can play up and down the lineup. And Novak, though, he would be first, just like the previous 3 guys, in takeaways per 60 on the Rangers. I promise that's not a coincidence. And there might be just 2 more that would be first on the team in takeaways per 60. So, yeah, Thomas Novak, I don't think he'd be the best ad, but definitely would be worth at least taking a look at and wouldn't be a bad option. Hence why he gets in the underrated video. Next up, we have a guy that I really wanted badly, but it looks like it might be unrealistic, and it's getting more and more by the day because of the team that he's on, starting to heat up, and that is Warren Fogle, who's on the Edmonton Oilers, and it sucks so much that they're starting to heat up because this would have been one of the perfect fits for the Rangers, and in 36 games played, 7 goals, 12 assists for 19 points. The baseline numbers, pretty solid there for a guy who's pretty much in, I think he's in their bottom 6. I'm not sure. If he's in the top 6, still respectable numbers there. He's a -4, which, again, plus minus, really not a big deal. 14 PIMs on the year. Only at an 8% shooting percentage, so maybe there is a little bit more to unlock in terms of his offense, and he probably is either way going to have a season high in goals for the year. He averages about 1330 of ice time. and he's not, unfortunately, a guy that could play center. But you look at every metric, it tells you that his offensive game is so good, and even his defensive game, it tells you the expected goals against are not that great. It's below average there, but everything else is pretty much in the blue. And then you look at the J Fresh card, 88th percentile in terms of even strength offense, 59th in even strength defense. So he does give you solid two-way play, just like a lot of these guys on this list. He would be 7th on the Rangers in hits per 60, 14th in block shots, and 1st, yet again, in takeaways per 60. And like I said, there's still one more to talk about here. That's a lot of guys that would be 1st on this team in takeaways per 60, isn't it? Warren Fogle, I'm not going to spend too much time on him just because of the fact that, again, it doesn't look like Edmonton is going to be in a spot where they're going to be selling anymore. But hey, I might as well mention him in case they start to cool off, because it is possible that they do cool off still and fall out. But Warren Fogle definitely is a guy that the Rangers should at least call in on if they can, at the very least. Next up, we have the guy that I think every single Ranger fan in the comments is going to say they want the most back out of all these options. And yeah, it's former Ranger Frank Vatrano, who they decided to let walk for whatever reason, but we could get into that whole thing another day. But Frank Vatrano, you might be asking, why isn't the underrated video, especially amongst Ranger fans? It's mainly just because I think he would be an underrated acquisition. He's still having just such a quietly good season. Made the All-Star game, which, you know, he's on Anaheim, so it's kind of easy for him to make the All-Star game. But regardless, he's still having a very good year, so there's not much to take away from him on that. In 38 games played this year, 18 goals, 10 assists for 28 points. That's the most out of anyone in this video, by the way, including the person that's coming up next. But 47 PIMs on the year. We know how Frank Vatrano plays. I don't think I need to explain it. His shooting percentage is at 14%, so a little high, but he's averaging about 18 minutes of ice time in Anaheim. We know how he plays. He's going to give you very good offensive production in terms of the points and just scoring goals. He loves to shoot the puck. I don't think I need to break down too much how he's going to be. And yeah, you look at some of the miscellaneous stats. He'd be 5th in hits per 60 on the Rangers, 7th in block shots per 60, and 7th in takeaways per 60 on the Rangers. He'd be another just great ad, and we know how he fit with Kreider and Zibanejad when he was on the Rangers last. So yeah, I don't think that I don't think this is a secret that Frank Vatrano would be a very good ad for this Rangers team, and I think every single Ranger fan would welcome him back, including myself, with open arms in terms of what he would bring to the table, in terms of being a guy that is a pest, that will shoot the puck. You guys know Vatrano's game. Like I said, I don't have to break it down too much here, but Frank Vatrano, yeah, he's definitely had to make the list at some point. And last but not least, we have a guy who's having a quote-unquote down year, and that is Jordan Eberle of the Seattle Kraken. And yeah, I mean, people might say he's having a down year because they look at the goal total and it's lower than it probably should be considering what he's done in the past, but it is lower than it should be because of the fact that all the metrics pretty much show he's been unlucky this year. In 35 games played, he has 4 goals, 14 assists, 18 points. He's a -2 on Seattle with 9 PIMs. He averages about 17 minutes of ice time, and this is a guy that would play on the power play as well at even strength for the Rangers. I think it would be such a huge boost that is needed for this second unit, which you could pretty much get up and grab a drink, just go to the bathroom if you need to, whatever you need to do when the second unit comes on, you could get up because you're not going to miss anything, unfortunately. But he has been kind of middle of the pack in terms of offense and defense this year if you look at the model on Andy Rono. But then you look at the evolving hockey chart, and it says he's been pretty much unlucky. The expected goals for is way higher than his actual goals for. So at some point, he's got to get lucky, right? Like, he's got to be able to. The Corsi 4/60 is up there. Imagine what happens if he plays on a team like the Rangers, where that might go up, which the Rangers are a higher possession team. Expected goals against is positive too, and his Corsi against is positive. And you look at the previous years, he has just been the definition of a consistent player in terms of him being pretty much a 20-goal scorer, from point production, goal production, to just how he plays in general. And he's a guy who's familiar with playing a defensive system, as he was under the New York Islanders and Barry Trotz's system for a couple seasons there, and probably had his most success there. And if you look at the chart too for J Fresh, 95th percentile in even strength offense, 20th percentile in even strength defense, and pretty much everything's in the blue except for penalties, but that's kind of been not really an issue for him this year. He'd be first on the Rangers in takeaways per 60, 18th in block shots, 14th in hits per 60. You're not asking him to come in, though, and hit and block shots. You're asking a guy like Jordan Eberle to come in and potentially drive Kreider and Zibanejad, who desperately need that boost on their line and desperately need some goal scoring on their line. And I think Jordan Eberle would be such a good fit, and I think that he's not talked about enough amongst this fan base in terms of a guy that the Rangers really should go after. He's getting very unlucky this year, and I promise that his goal production would go up if he comes to the Rangers. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I have in terms of the underrated players. I think that's, yeah, I don't know if I have much to add with Eberle, but yeah, that pretty much wraps up that. So that's going to be it for me with this video. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section who your favorite is, who your least favorite is of these options. I think Frank Vatrano is going to be the favorite. So outside Frank Vatrano, give me another answer in the comment section of who you like, or even rank them. Whatever you want to do. I'm not stopping you guys, but regardless, that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tomorrow, we're going to have the defenseman list come out, so keep your notifications on so you can see that. And then we have the Big Fish forward list the day after, so you don't want to miss any of that. Turn on your notifications for all of it. Don't forget to subscribe as well. We're on the road to 2K subs. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Let's go Rangers.